This happened a couple of years ago, right before school let out for the summer. It was the last day of 8th grade in Crescent Grove, a town so small that the shadows of the forest always seemed to creep across its edges. Everyone was buzzing with excitement, scribbling signatures and cheesy farewells into yearbooks, filling the air with laughter and the bittersweet energy of endings. The building itself was massive for such a small town, an aging brick school with creaking floors and windows that rattled when the wind blew. That day, it felt different, like the walls were holding their breath, as though waiting for something to happen. Maybe I only noticed that now, looking back, but I can't shake the feeling. To keep order, the teachers split the classes into different wings. Mine was tucked near the old library, a place few students liked going. The library smelled of mildew, its shelves heavy with dust-coated books no one touched anymore. The hallway outside was lined with faded photographs of long-dead principals, their eyes following you no matter where you stood. I was waiting for my friends when I noticed him. At first, I thought he was just another teacher, someone supervising the halls. But as I looked closer, I realized I didn't recognize him. He was tall, unnaturally tall, and wore an old-fashioned suit that seemed too dark for the bright fluorescent lights. His wide-brimmed hat cast his face in shadow, and no matter how much I squinted, I couldn't make out his features. He stood perfectly still at the far end of the hallway, his posture too rigid, too unnatural. At first, I tried to laugh it off, telling myself it was just some parent or visitor. But then I noticed something that froze the smile on my face. Everyone else walked past him like he wasn't there. Students rushed by with yearbooks in hand, teachers barked orders, doors slammed, but no one acknowledged him. Not a glance, not a word. It was as though I was the only one who could see him. My throat went dry. I looked away, pretending to dig into my backpack, hoping he would vanish when I looked back up. But he didn't. He was closer. Not walking, not moving like a person should, just closer. Maybe 10 feet nearer than before. My chest tightened. I could feel the air grow heavy, cold enough that goosebumps prickled across my arms. I wanted to call for my friends, but my voice caught in my throat. The bell rang, and the hallway erupted with noise again. Students poured out of classrooms, filling the air with chatter and footsteps. I blinked, desperate to break whatever hold the figure had on me. For a moment, I thought I'd imagined it all. But then, through the sea of bodies, I saw him again, only a few feet away now, towering above the crowd, his head tilting slowly toward me. And then I saw his face, or rather, the absence of one. Beneath the brim of his hat, there was only shadow, endless, consuming, a void that made my stomach lurch. And yet, I could feel it staring at me. Not just at me, but into me. I bolted. I didn't care what anyone thought. I shoved through the crowd, my heart hammering as I sprinted for the nearest exit. Behind me, I heard nothing, no footsteps, no chase, but the sense of being followed was overwhelming, like icy fingers brushing the back of my neck. When I burst through the doors into the daylight, I expected relief, but the world outside felt wrong too. The laughter of my classmates sounded distant, distorted, like voices underwater. I turned, scanning the windows of the building, and there he was, standing inside, on the other side of the glass, his hat tilted low, his faceless gaze fixed on me. For the rest of the day, I couldn't shake him. I'd glance across the playground and catch sight of him standing by the trees. I'd look up during lunch and see him at the far end of the cafeteria, always still, always watching, and always no one else seemed to notice. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house made me jolt awake. Every shadow stretched too long across the walls. At some point, I must have drifted off, because I woke to the sound of something in my room. The air was ice cold, my breath visible in the darkness. Slowly, I turned my head. He was there, the man in the hat, standing at the foot of my bed, his towering figure blotting out the faint glow from the streetlight outside. He didn't move. He didn't speak. He only tilted his head, as if studying me. Paralyzed with fear, I couldn't scream, couldn't move. My heart pounded so loud I thought it would burst from my chest. I squeezed my eyes shut, praying it was just a dream, praying he would be gone when I opened them again. But when I did, he was closer. Now at my bedside, leaning over me, the brim of his hat nearly brushing my forehead. That endless shadow stretched across me, swallowing me whole. And then darkness. I woke the next morning in the exact same position, sunlight streaming through the window, my body drenched in sweat. He was gone. But deep down, I knew he hadn't left. I still see him sometimes, reflected in mirrors, lingering in the corner of dark rooms, watching from the edge of the woods near Crescent Grove. And though years have passed since that last day of 8th grade, I know this truth. You don't escape the man in the hat. He waits, he follows, and once you've seen him, he never lets you go. It happened a few years ago, in the small forgotten town of Blackwood, a place tucked deep within the forest where fog never seemed to lift, and where even the church bells sounded hollow. I was younger then, still carrying a mix of arrogance and curiosity that made me blind to warnings. Locals had always whispered about Blackwood Hollow, the stretch of woods that bordered the town. They said strange things moved there after sundown, and if you heard your name whispered in the trees, you should never answer. At the time, I dismissed all of it as old superstition. After all, how many ghost stories are born just to keep children inside at night? But that was before I spent a single evening inside those woods. Before I understood what true fear feels like. The kind that settles into your bones and lingers long after you leave. It began on a late autumn evening. The air was damp, carrying the smell of decaying leaves, and a full moon hung low, veiled by restless clouds. I was with two friends, Daniel Crow and Marissa Vale, both of whom had the same reckless streak I did. We dared each other to enter the hollow, to wander deeper than anyone usually dared to go. It was supposed to be just a walk, a test of courage. But courage often fades when the shadows grow thick. The first thing I noticed was the silence. No crickets, no owls, no distant rustling. Just the crunch of our own footsteps. Every tree looked like a figure waiting in stillness, and every gust of wind felt like a whisper too faint to catch. At first, we laughed it off, forcing jokes to cover the unease crawling under our skin. But then Daniel stopped walking. His face had gone pale, his eyes fixed on the darkness between two twisted oaks. "Did you hear that?" he whispered. We hadn't heard anything, at least not at first. Then came the sound, soft, deliberate, like someone stepping on wet leaves. The problem was, it wasn't coming from behind us or beside us. It was coming from deeper in the woods. Ahead, waiting. We froze. Marissa clutched my arm, nails digging into my sleeve. I tried to convince myself it was an animal, maybe a deer, but the sound that followed was unmistakably human. A low, drawn-out exhale, like a sigh carried through the trees. "Let's turn back," I said quickly, but Daniel shook his head. He was the bravest or the most foolish among us. "It's probably some drunk from town," he muttered. "We'll scare him before he scares us." And with that, he stepped forward. The moon slipped behind a cloud, plunging us into almost complete darkness. We followed, reluctant, each step heavier than the last. The deeper we went, the more the air felt wrong, thicker, colder, pressing against our skin. I couldn't shake the feeling that something unseen was circling us, moving just out of sight. Then we saw it. Between the trees, maybe 20 feet ahead, a figure stood. Tall, unmoving, cloaked in shadow so dark it seemed to swallow the moonlight. I could make out no face, no features, only the outline of something that was too still to be alive, yet too present to be ignored. "Hey!" Daniel called out, his voice breaking the silence like glass. "Who's there?" The figure didn't move, didn't answer, and then, without sound, without motion we could see, it was closer, not walking, not stepping, just suddenly there, 10 feet closer than before. I swear I hadn't seen it move. My chest tightened, every instinct screaming to run, but my legs refused to obey. Marissa whimpered, tears already brimming in her eyes. I grabbed her hand, pulling her backward. "We need to go. Now." Daniel, stubborn to the end, took another step toward it. "I'm not afraid of you," he shouted. His voice cracked with a mix of defiance and terror. That's when it spoke. Not with a normal voice, not even with words. It was more like a sound inside our heads, vibrating through the marrow of our bones. A guttural rasp that formed our names, each of our names, spoken as though it had known us long before we were born. Marissa screamed. I yanked her arm, and finally her legs responded, stumbling backward with me. Daniel didn't move. His eyes were locked on the figure, wide and unblinking, as though he were trapped. I don't know how we made it out. I remember the feeling of branches clawing at our faces, the ground slipping beneath our feet, the sound of something chasing us. Heavy, impossibly fast, matching our every movement. I didn't dare look back. Couldn't. The only thing that mattered was the faint glow of the town street lamps ahead, cutting through the blackness like salvation. When we burst from the tree lean, Marissa collapsed to the ground, sobbing. I turned back, expecting to see Daniel right behind us, but he wasn't there. We never saw him again. The police searched for weeks. They said he must have gotten lost, that he'd wandered deeper into the forest and couldn't find his way back. But I know that's not true. I know something in Blackwood Hollow took him. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind carries just right, I still hear it. My name, whispered in that same rasping voice, drifting in from the edge of the trees. I haven't gone back since, and I never will, because the moment you hear it, the moment it calls for you, it already knows you belong to it. There's an old road outside of Ash Hollow, a desolate place in the countryside where the fog drapes itself across the hills like a shroud. The road is cracked and forgotten, lined with skeletal trees that seem to bend inward, watching all who pass. Locals avoid it, especially after dark. They say a woman appears there, a pale figure in a torn dress, always weeping, always waiting. I had heard the stories since I was a child. They called her the White Lady of Ash Hollow, and they claimed she was the restless ghost of a bride who died on her wedding night. Some said she was killed by her husband. Others whispered she had taken her own life when he abandoned her at the altar. Whatever the truth, her spirit was said to wander that lonely road, searching endlessly for something, or someone, lost to her. For years, I thought it was just a tale meant to keep curious teenagers from sneaking off into the countryside. That changed one cold November night when my cousin Elijah and I decided to test the legend for ourselves. The air was damp with mist, the moon just a sliver behind the drifting clouds. We parked Elijah's old truck by the roadside, its headlights cutting into the darkness but revealing nothing but the crooked branches and the cracked pavement stretching into the distance. The air felt wrong the moment we stepped out. Too quiet, too heavy. Think we'll see her? Elijah asked with a nervous grin, trying to mask the tremor in his voice. If she's real, she won't show herself to us? I replied, though my stomach was already nodding. Ghosts don't like being summoned. We walked slowly down the road, our footsteps echoing in the stillness. Every so often, Elijah would glance over his shoulder, his unease growing. I tried to laugh it off, but the silence pressed on me like a weight. It wasn't just the absence of sound. It was as though the night itself was holding its breath, waiting. Then we saw her. At first, she looked like nothing more than a faint shimmer in the fog. But as we drew closer, the figure took shape. A woman impossibly pale, her dress tattered and flowing as though caught in a wind that wasn't there. Her hair fell in tangled strands across her face, and her head hung low as if she bore an unbearable sorrow. Elijah, I whispered, grabbing his sleeve. She didn't move at first. She simply stood there, swaying slightly, her hands clasped tightly in front of her chest. And then, with a sound that froze the marrow in my bones, she began to sob. The cry was unlike anything I'd ever heard, broken, hollow, filled with centuries of grief. Every instinct told me to run, but Elijah took a step forward. It's just some girl, he said, though his voice wavered. Maybe she needs help. I wanted to stop him, to drag him back, but my body refused to move. I could only watch as he edged closer, calling out softly, "Miss, are you all right?" Her head snapped up. What I saw in that moment will haunt me for the rest of my life. Her face, if it could be called that, was not human. Her skin was stretched tight, almost translucent, her eyes nothing but black hollows that seemed to swallow the dim moonlight, and her mouth, wide and trembling, opened in a scream that shook the trees around us. The sound hit me like a physical force, a shriek that pierced the night and rattled inside my skull. Elijah staggered backward, clutching his ears, his face twisted in pain. The woman, or the thing, moved toward him, not walking but gliding, her body flickering like a candle's flame in the wind. I finally found my voice. "Run!" Elijah and I bolted, sprinting down the cracked road toward the truck. I didn't dare look back, but I felt her presence chasing us, her wails growing louder, closer, as though the night itself was carrying her toward us. My lungs burned, my legs screamed, but fear kept me moving. We reached the truck and slammed the doors shut, Elijah fumbling with the keys. The headlights flicked on, and for a split second, I saw her standing in the beam just feet away. Her mouth was still open in that endless scream, her hands clawing the air as though reaching for us. Then the engine roared to life and Elijah floored it. The truck lurched forward, tires spitting gravel, and the figure vanished into the mist behind us. We didn't stop driving until we were miles away, the lights of Ash Hollow finally glowing on the horizon. Neither of us spoke for a long time. My heart pounded in my chest, and Elijah's knuckles were white against the steering wheel. Finally, he said, She looked right at me. His voice broke. She knew me. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was imagining it. But deep down, I knew he was right. The way her black hollows had fixed on him, the way she had reached for him, it hadn't been random. A week later, Elijah was dead. They said it was a car accident on the same road where we'd seen her. But I don't believe that. Not for a second. I think she followed him. I think she chose him. And when I close my eyes at night, sometimes I hear her sobbing outside my window, waiting for me to come back to Ash Hollow. And I know one day I will.